day of December 26th, 2004 dawned in Sri Lanka like any other. But in a few hours, it turned into one of the most devastating days in the history of the island. The tsunami waves spawned by the gigantic earthquake off the coast of Sumatra crashed into the Sri Lankan coast with devastating effect, leaving behind only the shambles of lives and property. 13 of the 25 districts in the island were severely affected. A total of 31,229 lives were lost and 23,189 injured. More than 4,100 people are still reported missing. The total number displaced was 516,150. Altogether, more than 1 million people, one of every 20 Sri Lankans, were directly affected by the tragedy. The value of damage to infrastructure was estimated to exceed $1.3 billion. Sri Lanka had never before seen such instantaneous mass death, such large loss of property to a natural disaster, such a backlash from one of their greatest benefactors. People clung to each other to save their lives. People huddled together as their lives were taken from them. In Paralia, almost 2,000 lives were lost in the destruction of the southbound train, the Samudra Devi, or the Queen of the Sea. The ocean, which is the main source of income, livelihood, and nutrition for so many thousands of Sri Lankans, had suddenly risen in anger. Was it because human beings had disrupted the cosmic laws that govern us? There are cosmic laws pertaining to genetic order, climatic order, and karmic cause and effect order. And these must be obeyed by human beings and human societies. When they are disrupted, the environment and its cycles are disrupted. And what rises is devastating, life-taking phenomena like tsunamis. Sarvodaya is a non-profit sustainable development organization that has been active in all parts of Sri Lanka for almost 50 years. When the tsunami struck, a huge responsibility was placed on the movement's shoulders to look after the survivors. It did not shirk this duty, and instead launched work immediately. The leaders of the organization met on the day of the disaster itself and set up a national operations center to collaborate with Sarvodaya district centers in all areas to bring immediate relief to the affected. This included supplying first aid and other medical needs, distributing food items, placing those rendered homeless in welfare centers, providing the basic necessities of these centers, taking care of the dead, and coordinating with other non-governmental and governmental organizations. A major part of this time was also used to conduct psycho-spiritual healing programs for the survivors, who were unsurprisingly very traumatized. As soon as 2 days after the disaster, Sarvodaya's Vishwaniketan Center started providing opportunities to receive counseling from Sarvodaya staff counselors and outside volunteer counselors. A large part of this work was done by Shanti Sena cadres, the youth volunteer group of the movement, who activated their village-to-village, heart-to-heart program to respond to the tidal wave. Members from the unaffected villages traveled to the affected areas, set up tents, and organized days of religious healing activities in places of worship in these villages. Survivors thronged these events in large numbers. These volunteers also helped the survivors with other activities, such as setting up tents, moving their salvaged belongings, cooking food, supplying medical help, and collecting information. It was an effort resembling the aid from a relative in the event of a family disaster. However, this urgent relief work was only the start of the long-term rehabilitation plan that was required for complete recovery from the tsunami. Within 3 weeks, Sarvodaya instigated a well-planned program titled Tsunami to Deshodaya, or From Tsunami to Reawakening of the Nation, which included providing the 5 R's of the movement's response to any natural disaster: relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction, reconciliation, and reawakening. The action plan envisages not only granting temporary relief and rehabilitation to the survivors of the tidal wave, but stresses on concrete action to rebuild the devastated areas and lives and reawaken the nation. In its 50-year development work based on Gandhian and Buddhist principles, Sarvodaya has identified 10 basic needs that must be satisfied for a society to be called civilized. These are water, clothing, food, housing, healthcare, energy requirements, the psychological and physical environment, communication, education, and spiritual and cultural needs. With this foundation, the movement activated its Tsunami to Deshodaya plan under 12 areas of action: camp and community management, water and sanitation, health and preventive care, housing resettlement, women, children, and orphans, psychological and spiritual healing, livelihood support, trade and microfinance, documentation and legal assistance, environmental management and ecology, communications, disaster management and mitigation, and integrated village development. Each of these areas were looked after by units that were already established in the Sarvodaya movement. For example, the Early Childhood Development Program, the Sarvodaya Information Technology Unit, the Sarvodaya Biodiversity Unit, and the Social Empowerment Division. The biggest problem in the aftermath of the tsunami was the large number of people living in welfare centers. The first step in their return to normal life was their return to permanent homes. Hence, Sarvodaya started on its house construction work as soon as possible. This work was launched on March 2nd, 2005, with the laying of the foundation stones to build houses in the districts of Gaul and Mathura. The first batch of houses were handed over on July 12th, 2005. In Sri Lanka, the activities of daily life are always closely accompanied by religious observances and rituals. Hence, in this construction work too, these rituals played a large role. laying of foundation stones, the beginning of construction, and finally, the ceremonial handover of houses were always done after consulting astrologers and star charts for auspicious times. The handing over ceremonies were essentially religious ceremonies, conducted according to the religious beliefs of the benefiting family. Building a house really means building a family, providing them with a single roof to link them together on a permanent basis. It is the first place where human beings learn to live in harmony with each other, sharing their lives and activities and belongings with those around them. Whatever a family has, if there is no house which can bring them all together, they essentially do everything separately. Hence, building a house does not just mean providing a family with a roof above their heads, but building a peaceful society where people live in harmony, sharing. Providing a family with links to each other is the first step in creating links between individuals in a whole society, and eventually building peace in the world. Sarvodaya engaged in the house construction work with an emphasis on supporting the beneficiaries. But it did not forget the unaffected families in the affected villages. As important as it was to place the power of rebuilding in the hands of the beneficiaries, was the task of getting the others in the villages involved in the process. Hence, this construction work became not only a form of empowerment for the beneficiaries who were able to use their own strength to rebuild their homes and in turn their lives, but also a tool to create harmony and sharing in the village. This construction was not just handed over to contractors and laborers to get the job done, but used to build peaceful villages where people share with each other in true Buddhist thought and practice. With metta or loving kindness, karuna or compassionate action, mudita or altruistic joy, and upeksha or equanimity. And this brings just not peace and sharing in these villages. Others in the village get livelihood support. It builds up their lives too. As 1 year was reached after the day of the great tsunami, Sarvodaya had completed 210 houses, while work was ongoing on 729. These are the 939 houses the movement aimed to erect in its first scheme of housing construction. At the same time, Sarvodaya worked on providing clean water and comprehensive sanitation facilities. At the beginning, it arranged for bowsers of water to be trucked to the areas, but eventually started cleaning polluted wells and constructing brand new ones. also built sanitation facilities. In the first year after the disaster, the movement built 929 new wells and repaired a large number of damaged wells. It constructed 5,143 latrines and repaired 556 damaged toilets. All of this construction work was coordinated by the Sarvodaya Rural Technical Services Unit. There were also large programs activated to provide livelihood support. These were largely coordinated by SEEDS, the economic empowerment arm of the movement. Individuals who received small amounts of money given in loans managed to convert them into great benefit. People lined up to receive tools and equipment to restart their lost livelihoods and change their lives from the small help they received. It was their strength that enabled them to use these to travel a great distance. The movement concentrated on rehabilitating and empowering the affected women. These women were traditionally involved with a lot of livelihood income work inside their homes. Work they could do while looking after their children and supporting their husbands. Thus, develop their psychological conditions and return to their lives, and in turn, return their families' lives to the old standards. The psychosocial healing programs concentrated on the affected women and children. It was these sections of the population that were most severely affected by the tsunami, especially with regard to the traumatization of the mind. Psychosocial healing programs with counselors and various children's activities were conducted. Preschools and multipurpose centers, which could provide more such programs, were newly built or damaged, reconstructed. It also initiated the Playground Project, which is building 85 new playgrounds in affected areas around the country. At the same time, large amounts of school equipment and uniforms were given to children who had lost theirs to the tidal wave. Because the best form of psychosocial healing for children is the ability to return to school and in turn return to their disrupted lives. Sarvodaya enacted programs to promote preventive health. The medical camps it conducted played a role in the effort by large numbers of organizations and individuals to avert the huge health crisis that was predicted by experts in the aftermath of the tsunami. Right now, Sarvodaya's Community Health Unit is engaged in training volunteers in villages to react to disasters, provide first aid, and supply assistance in other health-related problems. The Sarvodaya Legal Services Unit initiated a comprehensive program in affected areas to provide survivors with the documentation they had lost in the tidal wave and legal help regarding the problems they faced. The officers of this unit traveled personally to the welfare centers and conducted legal clinics to help the people. Eventually, when the government and large organizations such as units of the UN initiated such work, the Sarvodaya personnel joined in these efforts. In the area of environmental management and ecology, Sarvodaya cleaned up the affected areas, made the people aware of places that breed diseases, and encouraged them to clean up such areas. It conducted projects on tree planting and maintenance of the environment. The worst affected areas were those which had lost their coastal vegetation cover or the coral reefs in the surrounding sea due to human action. The movement focused on teaching the people of this and showing them the importance of living in harmony with the environment. Sarvodaya has a very focused program regarding information and technology. These systems were used to gather and collect information about the disaster efficiently and comprehensively so that relief activities would be conducted where they were most needed. These tools were also utilized to provide complete transparency regarding finances and activities. At the same time, it was very important to prepare for another disaster. The effects of the tsunami were so widespread and far-reaching due to the complete unpreparedness of the country, the government, non-governmental organizations and individuals to face a disaster of its magnitude. With this in mind, Sarvodaya set up a new disaster management unit that utilizes new technology and support from other organizations. It is recruiting volunteers from the affected villages, training them to respond to disasters, and conducting programs to build awareness. At the same time, it is developing both literature and technological tools to detect natural calamities and on how to best react to them. Buddhist thought is based on the belief of the interconnectedness and interdependence of all conditioned things. Natural processes are affected by human morals. According to the theory of the Panchaniyama Dharma, there are 5 natural laws at work in the cosmos: physical laws, biological laws, psychological laws, moral laws, and casual laws. Thus, humankind and nature are bound together in a reciprocal causal relationship. When immorality grips society, humankind and nature deteriorate. It is this belief that has led Sarvodaya to build an eco-village as part of its post-tsunami recovery program. Might the tsunami have happened because of the deteriorating conditions of people's moral standards? We do not know. But the Lagoswata eco-village is a step in the right direction of building communities that live in harmony with each other and with its environment. This is the first such village in Sri Lanka. And further, this was not just the work of the Sarvodaya movement, but was ably supported by the government and its agencies. Built on land provided by the government, this project showcases what can be done when non-governmental organizations and the government work together, something that is rare in Sri Lanka. All the houses in the village were built to eco-friendly standards. Their electricity is solar-powered. Each has a rainwater harvesting tank to utilize rainwater for domestic and agricultural purposes. The landscaping and the village planning were done in an eco-friendly fashion. The people were taught environmentally friendly garbage disposal and material usage, in addition to the conduct of other programs and living in harmony with the environment. An emphasis will be placed on sustaining these attitudes in the village in the years to come, so that it will be a role model for other such projects in the country. Today, Sarvodaya continues with its post-tsunami reconstruction work. It is not just a conglomeration of random activities that look at fixing things here and there, but a well-thought-out and well-planned process based on the 5R concept, with full recovery and reawakening in mind. At the same time, it is concentrated on doing this work in all affected areas without bias between ethnic or religious communities. For the past 50 years, Sarvodaya's philosophy has always been total all-around development. Social, economic, political, spiritual, moral, and cultural. This has been the concept used in the post-tsunami recovery program too, and this is what has led to its superlative success. It was this which was recognized when the movement was awarded the highest UN award for work in the area of settlement and shelter, the Habitat Scroll of Honor for the year 2005 for its post-tsunami work. As the movement continues with its efforts, it is concentrated on doing its work according to an established Sarvodaya movement policy and in keeping with the standards set by the government and the system around it. It is also concentrated on providing transparency to its activities by publishing comprehensive reports on its work. The movement has been inspired by the generous donations it has received from its friends around the world, but most of all, by the unbreakable spirit of the survivors of the tsunami, who are engaged in a great struggle to recover from the disaster that brought them to their knees. It is both of these factors that will sustain the movement's post-tsunami reconstruction process, which will continue unabated in the months and years to come.